put me in the movies. They're gonna make a big star out of me. We'll make a film about a man that's sad and lonely, and all I gotta do is act naturally. Well, I'll bet you I'm gonna be a big star. Might win an Oscar, you can't never tell. The movie's gonna make me a big star, 'cause I can play the part so well. Well, I hope you come to see me in the movies. Then I know that you will plainly see the biggest fool that's ever hit the big time, and all I gotta do is act naturally. We'll make the scene about a man that's sad and lonely, and begging down upon his bended knees. I'll play the part, but I won't need rehearsing. All I'll have to do is act naturally. Well, I'll bet you I'm gonna be a big star. Might win an Oscar, you can't never tell. The movie's gonna make me a big star, 'cause I can play the part so well. Well, I hope you come to see me in the movie. But then I know that you will plainly see the biggest fool that's ever hit the big time, and all I gotta do is act naturally.
On October 26, 2017, Dan Hinnon interviewed Mike Boggio III, president of Michael Entertainment Group, MEG. During the interview, Mr. Boggio discussed how he met David Crowley, the alleged $30 million deal, and when negotiations with the Gray State Project ended. You ready for this? Hello, Hollywood. Mike Boggio III met David Crowley through a mutual friend. The mutual friend connected us together, so we set up a meeting with David in California. I talked to David numerous times on the telephone prior to our first meeting, so that's how we got together. In May of 2014, David Crowley met with the Michael Entertainment Group in Los Angeles, California. It was a very promising project, Boggio told Hannon. David wrote the first go-around of the screenplay. We went through it thoroughly, made numerous changes, and advised David to make numerous changes. At first, we were taking it to the big screen, Boggio continued. And then, as we thought about it, we figured, how can we pack in all this information in a 2-hour or 2.5-hour film? Let's take it to television and have a series made out of it, which would have been a lot better for the concept of David's idea. Without specifically naming names, Mr. Boggio commented on the actors considered for the Gray State Project. We were talking about hiring some pretty substantial A-list actors to fulfill some of the roles in the project. 2 months earlier, on March 8, 2014, David had stated that Sean Stone wanted a role in the future project. Quote, Sean Stone, yeah, that one, apparently wants a role in Gray State. Mike Boggio thought that David's version of Gray State would be a great A&E show. It'd be a great cable network television show that could spin off into a film. A&E is also where Eric Nelson's documentary was eventually released. David was always very mature, Boggio told Hannon, very professional, very kind and courteous and outgoing and excited. That's the key word. Mike called David's excitement about the project phenomenal. The original setting for the Gray State movie was in the Midwest Minnesota area, but MEG felt the movie setting needed to be nationwide, coast to coast, north to south. The $30 million deal. We were negotiating with David at the time, Mike Bozio told Dan Hinnon. We were talking about budgets for the film. We were talking about getting into production. Like I said, we had a list of A-list actors that I'm not going to even mention in this interview, and we talked about a $25 to $30 million budget. We could easily see the budget in this film being a $25 to $30 million budget. On May 23, 2014, David Crowley posted an update about the deal with Michael Entertainment Group. Quote, "It just happened. I'm not sure how many details I can divulge at this point, but Gray State will be optioned within the next 2 weeks at a major budget and connected with A-list talent. We are connected with a producer who above all else wants to preserve the film's pro-liberty ideals. This is all we could have hoped for and more. Thank you all for being our strongest selling point. Let's make a movie." So there were negotiations, Bozio explained. We were actually trying to option a screenplay. When we option a screenplay, we option a screenplay for a certain amount of time. I think we were going for 24 months, if I remember right. And within that 24 months, we had to get into production with the film. Otherwise, the option goes back to David. So that's what our negotiations were with David at the time. Mr. Bozio then clarified, when we talk about $25 to $30 million, that's what we budgeted for the film project. That's what we budgeted for everything to do from start to finish. As far as MEG's last conversation with David went, according to Mike Bozio, it was sometime in September of 2014, and those negotiations continued until David died. We actually met face-to-face in Hollywood, Bozio relayed to Hinnon, sat down right on Sunset Boulevard. Sometime in that time frame with David. David was out in California, flew out for the night, just to come to sit down with us to discuss the updates on the screenplay and discuss the concept and everything else. So that's when we sat down and he actually made a new trailer. We're sitting in there watching the trailer, and then we discuss, hey, let's think about taking this to television. And we gave him the reason why. You get picked up by a network, and it was just off the heels of Sons of Anarchy leaving that network. So we figured this could be a good spin-off for the network that Sons of Anarchy was on. And it would pick up a demographic of Sons of Anarchy. So we talked to him about numbers and statistics and discussed, if we take this to a series, then not only do you have a series, it can play out longer, then at the end of the series it can go to the big screen. And he was excited about it. He was open-minded about it and thought it was a great idea. So I don't know where the whole depression comes into play when it comes to regards to making Gray State Network. In the beginning of David Crowley's connection to MEG, we put out an offer to David to option the contract, said Bozio, which would have given him some money up front, and then we would have went and ran with the film project or the television project. David would have been a producer on the film, so he would have been paid to be a producer on the film. And then he would have reaped some of the benefits of whatever the film grossed. We all would have. David had an idea, and it was a very, very, very strong idea, and that's why we all got together. Asked about the allegations that David walked away from the project, or if MEG decided not to go forward with the project, Mike Bozio seemed to deny both allegations. We didn't fire David, or we didn't get rid of David, however that went, and he didn't walk away from us. I mean, there was never any of that, and I don't even know where those two ideas came from. Nothing to my knowledge. Again, we never told David to get lost. I tried contacting David after our September meeting or discussion. I tried contacting David for months to discuss things. I didn't hear from him or anything. So I was getting a little nervous myself. Not nervous for our business transactions. David and I became friends. Not only were we business acquaintances, but we became friends. I called him on the holidays and wished him a happy Thanksgiving to him and his family. I did that numerous times until I heard the very strange, disturbing news. So when Mike received news of David's death, he was in total shock. I didn't believe it. So Christmas comes, Bozio continued. December 2014, I guess it is, comes around. I called David on Christmas, around Christmas time, to wish him and Camille and the baby happy holidays. I went out of town for New Year's. When I got back, I called him to wish him a happy New Year, and then I still didn't hear anything. So I felt it was kind of weird. So I contacted a mutual friend that David and I both had and asked this person. Let me take a step backward. Prior to that, I called this person saying, man, I haven't heard from David in at least a month. Have you heard from him? He's like, nah, but it's the holidays. You guys got him in the studio writing. When he gets into that writing mode, he shuts down and he secludes himself and he just focuses on what he has to do. I'll run by and see him and see the family and see how things are going. And I'm like, all right, cool. So like another month goes by, and then after New Year's, after I left David a Happy New Year's message on his voicemail, I called this person and said, man, I still haven't heard from him. Did you go over there for the holidays? The mutual friend had not gone to David's house yet. And then like the next day, the guy calls me and says, did you hear? And when he told me, I was in total shock. Owning the Gray State franchise. Who owns the rights? Who owns them now? If the deal with MEG was only with David, where did Danny Mason fit in? I have no idea what David and Danny's deals were, said Boggio. I can't answer to that. We had nothing behind that. We didn't have anything to do with that whatsoever. We didn't advise David to do that, so I don't even know why. I know that was brought up when we were doing our interview with Eric Nelson, but other than that, I have no idea why David did that, to be honest with you. Dan Hinton then asked if the script still had value. Well, when all this transpired, Boggio answered, we backed away. We backed away because of all the conspiracy theories and everywhere else. For a long time, for at least over a year, we didn't even discuss it. We just figured it was too toxic to even be involved with. Whoever got involved, I know since then they've made something. I know there were a couple guys out there that contacted me saying, hey man, we made this thing, we want you to see it, what's your thoughts? We never even got involved. Then we had a conversation at least a year, if not a little longer than a year after David's death, with David's dad, and I think it was Danny Mason. I think it was. I can't remember for sure, but we had a conversation with them about picking this thing back up and running with it because as far as I remember, David's dad got the rights to the film. Or got the rights to David's estate. So he wanted to do something with it. We started talking with David's dad and then nothing ever transpired out of it. 4 months after the bodies were found, Dan informed Mike Boggio III, Danny Mason was already in process of getting the Gray State trademarked with an attorney. At the end of the interview, Mike Boggio made his view very clear. We always had a pleasant experience with David. We never saw any downside to David whatsoever. Very, very motivated young man. It was actually a pleasure working with David. He took all of our ideas and all of our thoughts and took them to heart and never balked about it whatsoever to us. If he did something on his own time or around someone else, we were never privy to that whatsoever. Please consider watching the full interview with Mike Boggio III posted here.
All right, that sounds good. Hello, my name is Dan Hennon. Today is October 26th, 2017, and I'm going to be interviewing Michael Boggio III, president at Michael Entertainment Group, MEG. Hello, Michael.
How are you today?
Good, good. Very good this morning. Glad to be able to get on the line and speak with you. You've got some important, I think, pieces of the puzzle that relate to this entire David Crowley case that has gotten very strange over the last couple of years. Not only the alleged murder-suicide, but the aftermath and everything else here that went along with it. But more importantly, Eric Nelson has made a documentary called A Gray State, and I would like to get your honest thoughts on the movie, on the documentary, and first and foremost, have you seen it?
I have not seen it yet.
Okay. And just for the listeners out there, the movie's is not out in theaters. It's not public yet. It has made its rounds through a series of film festivals and whatnot, and private screenings. But so you have not seen it, and now are you in the film?
We are. Yeah, my partner and myself are.
Okay.
We did an interview with Eric Nelson out in California at least a year and a half ago. So it's been quite a while.
Oh, I see. So 2015, roughly.
Yeah, I think it was July of 2015.
Okay. Yeah, they came out. They interviewed us, myself, in Minneapolis here, and that was June of 2016. So
I was going to say it's 2016 we did.
Oh, okay.
July of 2016. Yeah.
Okay, good. So they made their rounds and they did that. How was that process, and what type of questions did they come up with?
They just asked us questions about our affiliation with the project and how we got involved with David and where it led to, and how long we knew David, how many meetings did we have with David, and pretty much what transpired during our relationship with David is what was discussed in the interview.
Okay, good. And also for the listeners out there, Michael Entertainment Group, or MEG, was founded in 2013. So, along with Michael O'Donnell was the other. David Crowley referred to you as the Mikes, and so that was. So you're roughly a fairly new company at the time, because you were in talks with David in the time frame of, I believe it was May through September of 2014. So this is a 1-year-old company at the time. Is that correct?
Well, between Mike and myself, we've been in the industry for a long time, and we decided to partner up together and start our own company. So that's how that transpired. So it's not like, we are a new startup company at the time, but we were both in the industry for many, many, many years.
Oh, very good, very good. And then how did, and so that interview was good. You felt that was good. You haven't seen obviously the final product, but
not yet. No.
Okay. How did David Crowley and the Gray State Project come into communication? How did you guys connect? Did you reach out to him, or did he reach out to you fellas?
We have a mutual friend, and the mutual friend connected us together. So we set up a meeting with David in California. I talked to David numerous times on the telephone prior to our first meeting. So that's how we got together.
Oh, perfect. And then it got to a point where David flew out there along with Kamel and met with you guys in May of 2014. And Mike O'Donnell wrote in I think it was the Dystopia article from Alec Wilkinson that he said, quote, "It was a roadmap for the next American Revolution." And then your quote was, "This was our most promising project." Can you elaborate a little more on those two quotes?
Well, I can't speak for Mike O'Donnell, but I can speak for myself. It was a very promising project. David wrote the first go-around of the screenplay. We went through it thoroughly, made numerous changes, advised David to make numerous changes. And so it was a very promising project. At first we were taking it to the big screen, and then as we thought about it, we figured, how can we pack in all this information in a 2-hour or 2.5-hour film? Let's take it to television. Let's take it network and have a series made out of it, which would have been, a lot better for the concept of the idea of David's idea. So it was very promising. We were talking about hiring some pretty substantial A-list actors to fulfill some of the roles in the project. So, with the whole concept of David's idea and the idea of the show, and we just figured it was going to be a great film, or even a series on TV.
Yeah, that's what he was mentioning. It could have been a web series or a television.
We weren't going to take it to web series. Web series is kind of a different market.
Okay.
It depends on what you're considering web series, right? Netflix or something like that, then yeah, we could take it to that, but web series normally is an 8 to 10 minute television show, that's it.
Yeah, there was another thing to clarify for some of those following the case is in looking at the interview with that Mitch Heil came out with recently, and after he dropped off the project at the time, and he was more, and I think some of the other Gray State members were looking to get this movie done and focusing on a one-effort movie to focus on, whereas David Crowley was looking at this project more as a franchise, more of different outgrowths from it, and have it, long-term deal with the documentary, the movie, the series, potentially, everything. It was the whole thing, and I think that's what kind of turned off Mitch Heil at that point, because he was like, let's just do this one thing and let's get it done. And David wanted to have this thing with many legs and kind of a lot of going in a lot of directions, and I think people were kind of potentially, and I'm not putting words in the mouth, put off by that, because was it it almost was like David couldn't focus on what he wanted to get done first. Did you get that, gist, I guess?
I never got that impression from David at all. He's always, every time we've talked, every time we set up meetings, he was always very focused and geared towards, getting the production of this film going or the television show going. Our ideas, Michael and myself, our ideas were, how do you pack the concept of this idea into a 2-hour film? I mean, it's virtually impossible. It would be so chopped up and so cut up. I mean, it could be done, obviously, right? They do it all the time in Hollywood. It could be done. However, we were looking at it from the long haul that, hey, you know what, this would be a great A&E show. It would be a great whatever, cable network television show that could eventually spin off into a film.
Correct. Okay.
David's ideas, he had so many different ideas and so many different angles that this thing could have lasted on cable network.
Very good. So he was very professional, very business professional, and very mature for his age. I mean, for a young guy coming out doing all of this, did you find him to be very mature, or a loose cannon that didn't have his head in the right spot, and like that?
We never saw David as a loose cannon. David was always very mature, very professional, very kind and courteous, and outgoing and excited. That's the key word for me with that question is excited. The amount of excitement with him was, with regards to the project, was phenomenal. I mean, how he was in his personal life, I have no idea, because we never got to that point, right?
Yeah.
I talked to David numerous times on the telephone in between our meetings over that period of time, and he was always very, very professional and like I said, very excited. When we sat down the first time after Mike and myself ran through the screenplay thoroughly, and gave him suggestions. Hey, for example, like the first go around of the screenplay was very centralized, and he had it centrally located, basically, if you will, in his territory, okay, in the Midwest. And we're like, well, no, because if this is the concept of what your movie or what the movie's going to be, then you got to be nationwide, right? You got to be coast to coast, north to south. So he went back to work in the studio and started, implementing some changes with regards to some of our suggestions and discussions that we had with him.
So this was, I've got here my notes say that was May of 2014 that you first met. And then in September, David said that he wrote for 31 straight hours and then mailed the new script to LA, so it would arrive on September 17th, the same day as Mike O'Donnell's birthday. And he also included a Gray State poster in with the package because he spent a lot of time, like you said, with those suggestions, and then repackaging that and sending it out. And it alludes to me that he was very proud of this next package. He had his wife read through it, and they mailed it off. And how was that received from you and the other Mike?
I'm trying to remember that. Now, I know, like, for my birthday, he sent me same thing. He sent me some Gray State merchandise, and he sent me a poster, and he signed it. I actually have a studio at my house, and it's actually hanging on the wall in my studio at my home. I think he had a couple different versions of the screenplay. I know the last version that I got from him, he put it in a 3-ring binder with a cover and wrote a nice little note to me on the front page of it and thanking us. And I mean, I still have that screenplay as well. So there was a few versions out there, but the last one we got, again, we were talking to him, and that's when we changed gears and decided that, hey, maybe this should go to television, this should go to cable network, because there's so much information we can pack into this thing that it would be better because it would get a longer run. So, and David was excited about that.
Yeah. Now, are you familiar with the quote from Jordan Page that came out saying that David and Gray State was in the middle of a $30 million deal from a company in Hollywood? Is that partially true? Is that half true? Is that Jordan Page was the musician in the.
Yeah, I know who Jordan is.
Okay, so he came out and said that, and he was criticized roundly for that. But I think a lot of people came back and says, you know what? I think he's got some of that right and partially right. He obviously wasn't lying, but it may have been just construed because his quote on Facebook said the film was about to start production with a $30 million budget from a major Hollywood studio. So I've got multiple questions on that, but could you talk to that a little bit first? This was kind of ties into my first question for you, that you were kind of a startup, one-year-old company. Was it your firm that he was talking to as far as a major Hollywood studio, or is that another company?
I can't speak for Dave. I mean, I can't speak for that. I don't know if he was in talks with anybody else or not. But I'm going to tell you, we were in talks. I mean, we were negotiating with David at the time. We were talking about budgets for the film. We were talking about getting into production. Like I said, we had a list of A-list actors that I'm not going to even mention in this interview.
Correct.
We had a list of A-list actors that were potential for the movie, and we talked about a $25 to $30 million budget. We could easily see the budget of this film being a $25 to $30 million budget. So, and at the time all this was going down, we were negotiating back and forth with David and his lawyer. So, you know, there were negotiations. We were actually trying to option the screenplay. And when we optioned the screenplay for a certain amount of time. I think we were going for 24 months, if I remember right. And within that 24 months, we had to get into production with the film.
Yep.
Otherwise, the option goes back to David. So that's what our negotiations were with David at the time.
Yeah, that was good. I think another quote that I saw on the internet, that someone did say that the project was, quote, greenlit, and they were working out the smaller details.
That's what we were doing. We were working out the smaller details.
Okay, so, and I got chastised pretty heavily on social media for saying that there was a deal, not a signed contract with signatures deal, but I'm an accountant by trade, and I've been in business my whole life, and so I think what it's safe to say is you probably had an agreement in principle and an oral agreement on a potential deal, but there was no contract that was signed, and I drew a lot of flack from that and I agreed that there was no contract signed, but you guys were going down that path with an agreement of some sort, right?
Correct.
Gotcha.
That's correct. As far as I know, we were the go-to guys for David. I mean, the discussions that we've had, within detail, the discussions we had, the conversations we had, the ideas that we had, and just from talking to David, like, I want you guys, but we were out looking for funding. We were doing all kinds of things as we were going through the whole contract process with David and his lawyer.
Yeah,
so,
and I agree that. Okay, go ahead.
All that was being done simultaneously.
Yep, and I think that, and David's lawyer, by the way, was Adam Gislason, and he's.
Right.
And he was no longer at the company that he's had. He had since switched. I have reached out to him to get another interview as far as talking with David's, state of mind and things like that. But that is correct. It was Gislason that was working with David in the Gray State. And the other question that I think that you can help clear up is when you're talking a $30 million budget, that is to me from a business standpoint is how much a project would cost. People are taking that David signed a $30 million deal, therefore he was sitting on a check written to himself for $30 million and he was rich. That is not and never would be the case. He would have gotten installment payments, correct, if this deal would have gone down to himself, or installments of some sort of a deal, but he was never at any time sitting on $25 to $30 million in his bank account ever, right?
Never.
Correct.
Yeah, and that's what. And when we talk about $25 to $30 million, that's what we budgeted for the film project. That's what we budgeted for everything to do from start to finish with the film project. So yeah, it was never here, David. Here's $25 or $30 million check. Let's get moving on the project. That's never the case.
Yeah, And that's important point to point out. I think it's an important point because the film, if it gone out to the big screens, could have grossed 60, 70, 80, 90 million, but the cost or the expense of making and producing the film was what your number of 25 to 30 was really at. And that was the expense to hire and produce and to get the actors and actually, make. That would have been out-of-pocket expenses for the company. Okay, very good. Very good. Well, that really helps clear the air on some of that, because at the same time there was concern that David was depressed, didn't have money, bankrupt, and at the same time people were talking that know that he was rich, but he did spend many years making this, and he didn't have a full-time job per se. So those statements are also correct to some extent. And now I think you're correct that he wasn't working with any other companies. I think that he was focused on you guys and taking the changes and the suggestions that you offered to write his subsequent. It sounds like there was potentially up to 6 different versions of the script. So I think it's safe to say he wasn't working with anyone else, but that's just my opinion.
I agree with that. I agree with that. With the conversations we had, and he never let on to work with anybody else. It doesn't mean he wasn't talking to anybody else. Just from my opinion and my thoughts here, that it's just like we were the go-to guys.
Yeah, and then on September 26th, David receives a response from Michael Entertainment Group saying that his script would be better suited for a TV series, and this was after it looks like Mike O'Donnell ran the cost of the project, and that's where he came up and said basically it's better suited for a TV series. And that's the last we really hear from communication from you three folks, and people think, or there's conjecture that this got David down, this got David depressed, and ultimately in the time frame where he started isolating himself and his family. How do you think that his response was to that TV series?
Well, we actually met face to face in Hollywood, sat down. I don't remember the name of the establishment we were at, but it was right on Sunset Boulevard. Sometime in that time frame with David was out in California, flew out for the night just to come sit down with us and discuss the updates on the screenplay and discuss concept and everything else. So, and that's when we sat down and he actually made a new trailer. We're sitting in there watching the trailer. And then we discussed, hey, let's think about taking this to television. And we gave the reason why. It's, you get picked up by a network, and it was just off the heels of Sons of Anarchy leaving the network.
Oh, that's right. Yes.
And so we figured this could be a good spin-off for the network that Sons of Anarchy was on, and it would pick up the demographics of Sons of Anarchy. So, we talked to him about numbers and statistics and discussed, if we take this to series, then not only do you have a series, it can play out longer, then at the end of the series you can go to big screen. And he was excited about it. He was open-minded about it and thought it was a great idea. So to sit there and say that, with the message from O'Donnell that we're going to take this to the network, the pressure didn't play in one bit to that, as far as I know, because he was, like I said, when we discussed it, he was excited about it. He thought it was a great idea. And if we could follow through with that, then let's, and discuss it, and it's the right move, then we could go that route. So I don't know where the whole depression comes into play when it comes to regards to making Gray State Network.
Yeah, I think that was, and that line, that narrative, I think, was injected into the story to help sell the official narrative that he was down and depressed when he was actually excited for this entire project, because at the same time he was working on his documentary called Gray State: The Rise, and he was going to release that on YouTube actually for free around Christmas time or the end of the year there in 2014, which was basically, he was putting the final finishing touches on that. Now, were you involved at all with the Gray State: The Rise, or did he mention and talk to you guys about that piece, or is that just an individual project that he was working on the side?
Yeah, we weren't involved with that at all. We knew he was doing it, he was talking about doing it, but we had no involvement with that whatsoever.
And so releasing a a documentary like that, 2.5-hour documentary called The Rise, he was going to give it away essentially for free on YouTube just to get the message out, inform people, educate the public. And that kind of flies in the face of folks saying that David was doing all this for the money. He was out for the money. He was out to get rich. He was trying to make a boatload of money on all these projects. And that was not David's personality. Can you talk to that a little bit? He knew he was going to make some money on this, but he was not out there. He was more to get the message out and his script. Is that correct, or was he a gold digger per se in Hollywood, trying to hoping you guys would bite on this story so he could become a millionaire?
Well, I can't speak for what his thought process is, but I can tell you from my run-ins with David, money is always a factor. I don't care what you do in business, money's a factor, right? David's an artist. David was an artist through and through, period, okay? He had an artist mindset, and he had a belief in what he was doing, okay? And he did it for the love of what he was doing. However, in the back of your mind, you're always thinking about money. And we discussed money with David. I don't remember the parameters of what we discussed, but we discussed money with David. And David's from my recollection, David's first love was the art that he was performing, okay? But there was always money as a factor. I mean, everybody's in business to make money. I'm not in business to give stuff away for free and, at the end of the day, be, who I am. I mean, it's a matter of there's always a money factor. Now, with our deal with David, I'm not going to discuss figures or anything like that, but our deal with David, we put out an offer to David to option the contract, which would have gave him some money up front, and then we would have went and ran with the film project or the television project. David would have been a producer on the film, so he would have been getting paid to be a producer on the film, and then he would have reaped some of the benefits of whatever the film grossed. We all would have. So that was the factor here, and it wasn't like David was a money-hungry grabbing guy, and he was trying to weasel his way into Hollywood. David had an idea, and it was a very, very, very strong idea, and so that's why we all got together. But again, he did it for the love of the art, but also knowing that, hey, this could be a payday.
Correct. Oh, very good. That's all good information. Trying to get the listeners to this, kind of get their head around David's personality and his mentality, because of a lot of that, in your talk right there, your description ties in with everyone that I've talked to. It aligns in with his personality. I never met David myself, never even spoke to him, so I started following this case after the bodies were found, but that's very much in alignment with what I've been hearing. The other concept that I'd like to square away with you guys from Michael Entertainment Group is there was conjecture that David, either the talks broke down and you guys cut him off, or David left, or David, quote, walked away, and the agreements just didn't work out. So it ultimately got down to there's two types of people out there following this case. They fall into two camps. One believed that Michael Entertainment Group essentially fired David or broke off the talks and says, screw you, get lost. Or David said, I know I got the offer, I'm all set to make big bucks. You know what, it's not for me because I want to run I do not want to be just a producer. I want to be the director on the film, and I don't want anything changed. I don't want anything altered with this script. Therefore, see you later. I'm going to move and part ways. Those are the two camps that we're dealing with, and if you could talk to that a little bit as far as what you think was more of the truth.
Neither one of them. Neither one of those even came into play when we were in discussions with David. And David knew he wasn't going to be the director. We discussed that early on with David because he wasn't a known director. So if we were going to go into this film with a $25 to $30 million budget, David couldn't be the director. We would have needed a top name director in the industry, which has clout. Okay, so and David knew that from day one, and David was fine with that. David what we discussed with David. So we didn't fire David, or we didn't get rid of David, or however that went, and he didn't walk away from us. I mean, there was never any of that, and I don't even know where those two ideas came from.
Yeah, I think there was
At least to my knowledge. At least to my knowledge.
Yeah.
I mean, again, we didn't tell. We never told David to get lost.
Yeah, and I think
tried contacting David after our September meeting or discussion. I tried contacting David for months to discuss things with nothing. I mean, I didn't hear from him or anything, and so I was getting a little nervous myself. Not nervous for our business transaction, but just nervous because I couldn't. I mean, listen, David and I became friends. Not only were we business acquaintances, but we became friends. So, you know, I mean, I called him on the holidays and wished him a happy Thanksgiving to him and the family, and you know, whatever. I mean, I did that numerous times until I heard the very, very disturbing news. You know, so.
Now, how was your how did you receive the news of this, and how did you process that after working so close and becoming friends with David?
I was in total shock. I didn't believe it. I didn't believe it.
And then,
I actually so Christmas comes, December 14, I guess it is, comes around. I called David on Christmas, around Christmas time, to wish him and Camilla and the baby happy holidays. I went out of town for New Year's. When I got back, I called him to wish him a happy New Year. And then I still didn't hear anything, so I felt it was kind of weird. So I contacted a mutual friend that David and I both had and asked this person, like, let me take a step backwards. Prior to that, I called this person saying, man, I haven't heard from David in like at least a month. Have you heard from him? He's like, no, but it's the holidays. You guys got him in the studio writing. He's been, when he gets into that writing mode, he shuts down and he secludes himself and he just focuses on what he has to do. He goes, but as the holidays are coming up, I'll run by and see him and see the family and see how things are going. And I'm like, all right, cool. So like another month goes by, and then after New Year's, after I left David a Happy New Year message on this voicemail, I called this person and said, man, I still haven't heard from David. Did you go over to Brawley? He's like, no. And then like the next day, the guy calls me and says, did you hear? And when he told me, I was in total shock.
Wow, because and you also knew Comel. She was out there for one or two of the visits also, and took a picture of you guys standing together. What was your thoughts on Comel?
I thought she was amazing. Her and I have a lot in common. She was a nutritionist, and I'm very heavily into nutrition and paleo and all that other stuff. And so her and I hit it off very, very well because we have the same interests. Right?
Okay.
So,
okay.
Yeah, I mean, we had many great conversations about the whole paleo diet and nutrition and eating healthy and all that other stuff. So, I mean, we always had great conversations about that.
Oh, excellent. Was there any truth to David and Comel looking to buy a home or rent an apartment in L.A.? And if so, how close were they to doing it? Did they have a real estate agent or anything, or were you aware of that at all?
No, I was not aware of that at all.
Okay.
I have no idea.
Okay. That came up in some discussions, and I thought you might be aware of that. And then, just in our last few minutes here, what was your thought when you found out that David's mother, Kate, died unexpectedly in August?
I didn't even know about that either at the time. I didn't know about that either.
Okay.
So, David never made mention of that. I mean, obviously, if I would have known that, we would have done something, sent flowers or something, but I had no idea about that.
Oh, well, no, she died after the bodies were found.
Oh, not prior.
No.
Okay. Yeah, you know what, I honestly don't remember.
Okay. It was about 8 months later, and she was, according to police reports, really the only person close in the family that questioned the narrative of this going down that way. So people, including myself, thought it strange that she mysteriously died. We never did get an answer as to how she died. She was young, healthy, worked 2 jobs, and then just mysteriously died on her back patio one night. And so they found her body. So I don't want to get into the conspiracy side of that, but I find that very strange. But that was news to you then as well.
Yeah, that's news to me. You know what? I didn't even hear about it. Not that I can remember.
Now, at the end of, it looks like my last question here is more legal related with Adam Gislason, and you might be able to have some comment on this, being in the business. Now, David went to his main character star in the program, was Danny August Mason, was his main actor, and wanted to get him out of the program, out of the copyright, out of any rights in the film, and so went to his lawyer Gislason to send Danny in an email, an attachment that just says, here you go, here's a form to sign to release your rights to this film, we're moving forward without you. And Danny never responded back to that. And then in December, around the 7th, David Crowley wrote back to Danny August Mason and says, what's the status on that? Have you signed that away, because I need to move forward, and we need to essentially for this project cut ties. Danny August Mason said that I need to run it by my lawyer before I sign anything, and I'll get back to you. And he never really did. So it was clear that we've got evidence that David wanted Danny out of the project. He never responded back. Is that a common thing with as far as signing away your rights? Because if David would have become wealthy and made this project, Danny would have been sitting on the sidelines with absolutely nothing. Is that a common thing, or how would someone take that if you were served with a paper like that, essentially, with your essentially one of your friends working on it?
I have no idea what David and Danny's deals were. I can't answer to that. And we had nothing behind that. We didn't have anything to do with that whatsoever. We didn't invite David to do that, so I don't even know why. I know that was brought up when we were doing our interview with Eric Nelson, but other than that, I have no idea why David did that, to be honest with you.
Okay.
So,
yeah, he was on the verge around the. It seems like the September-October time frame is when he was doing some house cleaning with the guys on his project. And I don't know if you knew any of the fellas there, and I'm not going to ask you that, but he was cleaning house because he wanted to put together a new, quote, trustworthy team, and he was pulling away from everyone in his group, and I think that got spun into the media narrative that he was distancing himself and going into a deep depression and isolating himself, but really he was cutting ties with those closest to him because he didn't find them trustworthy. And I think that's what kind of leads into this whole, when you get into the motive of the potential murders. He's sitting on this script, whether David was alive or not. That script could have been budgeted for $25-30 million, and that was the value of it. That was the potential value of the script, whether David was involved with it or not. And if he was wiped out, knocked out of the way, someone else took it over, they would have been able to reap the benefits of this project. And so that's kind of the thinking that those of us have as far as a motive for this. And the only people I'm getting hit with hard as people against that theory is the people in the gray state. They're saying there was no deal, there was no value, the script was worthless, David wasn't working with anybody. And, so it comes into that whole means, motive, and opportunity that many think that it's actually the gray state members themselves had the potential greatest thing to gain if David was out of the picture. If the body was found and someone else came and presented you with the script, would it still be viable? Will it still be the same asset value? Or was David the linchpin holding it all together?
well, when all this transpired, we backed away. We backed away because of all the conspiracy theories and everything else. We just, for a long time, for at least over a year, we didn't even discuss it. We just figured it was too toxic to even be involved with. So whoever got involved, I know since then they've made something. I know there were a couple guys out there that contacted me saying, hey man, we made this thing, we want you to see it, what's your thoughts? And we've never even got involved. Then we had a conversation at least a year, if not a little longer than a year after David's death, with David's dad, and I think it was Danny Mason. I think it was. I can't remember for sure, but we had a conversation with them about picking this thing back up and running with it because, as far as I remember, David's dad got the rights to the film, or got the rights to David's estate. So
yeah.
He wanted to do something with it. So we started talking
Yeah, and it seems like I would bet that the other person would have been Danny August Mason, because 4 months after the bodies were found, Danny was already in process of getting the Gray State name trademarked with an attorney to get the the name and a phrase Gray State trademarked already. So he was moving forward with the project. So it must have been him, was what would be my guess.
Yeah, it must have been.
Okay. All right. Well, I've got to let you go here, Mike. I thank you for your time. But do you have any other closing thoughts to wrap this up, to help clear the air? If there's anything out there that you can think of.
Not that I can think of. I mean, again, I'll reiterate myself, but we always had a pleasant experience with David. We never saw any downside to David whatsoever. Very, very motivated young man. It was actually a pleasure working with David. He took all of our ideas and all of our thoughts and took them to heart, and never balked about it whatsoever to us. So, I mean, if he did something on his own time or around someone else, we were never privy to it whatsoever. So.
Excellent. All right. Thanks. That makes sense. All right, Mike. Thanks for your time. I think it's very helpful information. I'll get this out so people can make their own conclusions from it, but at least have some basis from someone in the know, someone who worked closely with him in his last final months, and I think it's very, very helpful. So I can't say enough. I appreciate your time.
Thank you so much.
All right. Thanks, Mike. Have a good day.